Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. Well, today is a special episode because it's a guest that is joining me today that has been on the podcast before. This is a guy that some of you may remember if you were following the podcast when I was talking about the Premier League. This is someone that I said at the time, you're basically going on a podcasters tour regarding him going on weekly podcasts trying to promote his book that he was hopeful of getting published. Well, I'm happy to say that the book has been complete. He has got the backing from the Kickstarting people, and now he's shipping off the books all over the world and everything through his pre-order. So I would like to welcome back onto the podcast, all the way from England, author of his brand new book, Red Wine and Arepas, How Football is Becoming Venezuela's Religion, Mr. Jordan Florit. How are you doing, Jordan?
Very well, Todd. Thank you very much for having me back. It seems like a lifetime ago that you had me for the first time. So much has happened. I feel about 10 years older, probably look about 10 years older. So thank you very much for having me back.
Hey, man, it's a blast, and it's almost been a year. I think the last time I had Jordan on was in August, and so obviously that episode's not out there anymore, which, if you guys enjoyed this a lot, maybe I have the file still of that episode, so if you guys want to hear it, I'll release it and everything as a special and everything. But before we get into talking about the book and everything, we were talking off mic, off air. If you remember back in December when the Union were linked with Jose El Brujo Martinez, no one hardly knew anything about him other than a couple of YouTube videos that people found on the internet. Well, I know a guy that was writing a book on Venezuela soccer, and that guy was Jordan, and that's what I told you guys on one of the earlier podcasts. And I knew you had connections, Jordan, and your friend was a fan of the team that El Brujo was playing for over in Venezuela, and your friend sent back a scouting report and everything and told us he plays with a lot of fight. He adds a lot in the attack, and he's very fast. Well, Jordan, everything that your friend said and so on has been correct about El Brujo, and we just absolutely love him here in Philadelphia. I know you sent a lot more on that tweet and everything, but for whatever reason, I couldn't find it on Twitter and everything. But Ernst Tenner, who's the sporting director for the Philadelphia Union, he said El Brujo would be a project, and then Mataj Orvat, who the Union signed from Slovakia, he's 21 years old. He said that Matai would be the starter ahead of El Brujo, but that's not up to him. He's not the coach. He's only the sporting director. And to all of us Philadelphia Union surprise, El Brujo took the starting job and has not looked back since. And we just love the passion that he brings to the field. We love the toughness, and he's not afraid to put in a challenge. Yes, he gets a lot of yellow cards like you warned us and everything, and hopefully as we go forward he can calm that down. But man, again, I just appreciate you for reaching out to your friend back in Venezuela, for giving us that scouting report back in December. And this guy looks like he'll be the real deal, and I'm sure if he keeps up the way he's been playing the last couple games for the Union, he'll definitely crack into the national team with Venezuela.
Yeah, so when you reached out, one thing I knew straight away is that I'd get a very accurate and honest reflection of the player. Venezuelan football fans that follow the domestic league are very, very passionate about Liga Football. There's sort of this conflict of interest when it comes to soccer in Venezuela. You've got a lot of fans that are very diehard fans of the league, and then you've got a lot that take far more interest in the big five in Europe or MLS or the Argentine Superliga. There's a real divide between taking an interest in what you've got at home and what you've got overseas. But the ones that follow the Venezuelan league, they really know their stuff. So as soon as you reached out, I knew that I'd get an answer quickly. So I'm not surprised that it was accurate, but it's good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know he's just going to continue to hit those high levels. And I'm sure for the people back home, once they see that he continues to have good performances, it's only a matter of time, like I said, that he gets a call up and everything. And I'm sure one thing that's disheartening to people back in Venezuela is to see Joseph Martinez for Atlanta United. He tore his ACL and everything, done for the year and everything. So I'm sure that's probably disheartening for people back home and everything, where this is their big superstar over there.
Yeah, but it happened if something like that was gonna happen, sort of now was a better time for it to happen. There's been no international games since the back end of 2019. It looks like this week CONMEBOL have taken a vote on when to restart the World Cup qualifiers, and it looks like September, October is going to be the window where it will return. By the time that comes, obviously Joseph won't be ready to play, but it would have been about 8-9 months since he got the injury. But you've also got a new manager of the national team since last time. Rafael Dudamel resigned to take the job in Brazil at Mineiro. He was sacked about 6 weeks later, so that didn't pan out for him. But whilst that was going on, Venezuela were linked with a few different managers of different caliber. You had off the record, not public, but I knew through people I was talking to at the time, the former Parma, Inter Milan, Chelsea striker Hernan Crespo was in the running for the job. So was Di Baggio from Italy. The front runner in the public eye was Sampaoli, who formerly managed Santos and was manager to Jefferson Sotelo, the Venezuelan number 10. And he was the public front runner. Jose Peseiro, who got the job, the Portuguese manager, was like, his name was sort of in the mix, but nobody expected him to get it. But yeah, he's been manager since February. Obviously, been in the job for 5 months now and hasn't had to do much. There's not even been football for him to watch to make selections. But it's a complete fresh start for Jose. Before he tore his ACL, before Dudamel resigned, he had basically announced his retirement from international football. Martinez said, "I'm not playing for Venezuela for as long as Dudamel was manager." That was the insinuation from what he said. So these past 12 months, it's a terrible injury to have. But if there was ever going to be a time to be out of football for that amount of time, like, this was it.
I mean, it's a terrible time that we're all going through and everything. And I, like you said, I guess, if there's a time for it to happen, it's this time and everything, where he can recover and not worry about trying to rush back his fitness for Atlanta United and for the national team and everything. But let's go ahead and just give a little history about the book. Like I said in the introduction, you were on the podcast back in August, and you were staying busy all last summer, going on however many podcasts you can get yourself on just to promote and say, hey, look, I have this idea for this book about Venezuelan soccer. I got offered a publishing deal, but it wasn't the right deal for me. And what I want to do is do a Kickstarter campaign and see if people will back me. And like I said, people backed you and then some. So the first thing I want to know is, I know it has to feel good for you, Jordan, to finally get to have the backing for the book, and now you've shipped books out all over the world and everything, where at the time you were like, I think this is possible, but I'm not sure. And just all the hours and research and time traveling to Venezuela, what we'll get into, I mean, all that's done, and now the books are going across many, many, many countries.
Yeah, it was like this time last year, exactly mid-July, I'd yet to launch the Kickstarter. I knew it was something I was going to do. I'd been researching how to crowdfund. I'd been researching about self-publishing, because it was by that point the route I decided to take. And I had to put myself out there a lot, because even though I've been writing online for 10 years now, I'd actually not been publishing many pieces or featuring on many websites for a while, because I hadn't been submitting. I'd taken a step back from writing online because of my day job, and I sort of stepped away from it entirely. And the book developed pretty rapidly. I'd always wanted to write a book, but I was never going to write one for the sake of it. Like, I needed something to inspire me and really, really motivate me. And that was just going to have to happen organically. I started writing again in like January, February 2019. And by the April, like, this idea had already started to evolve into something. So I sort of, for people that had followed me for a long time on Twitter, like, people were aware that I was a writer, because every now and then I would submit the odd piece. But for a lot of people, I was no one. And, comparatively, I am still a no one. But I had to, like, get the idea out there quickly and as efficiently as possible. And, thanks to you and people like you, people were willing to listen and give me the platform, be it podcasts or websites, to write about this project, write about Venezuelan football. And it basically kickstarted a hectic 12 months, which is now over. Those 12 months are over, but like, the journey is far from over, because the book is now getting published into Spanish, which will be out in January. I've gone self-published, and I've gone self-published to the extreme. I thought I was going to be using Amazon's self-published platform, but yeah, even that didn't give me the freedom that I needed. So I've gone entirely in-house. I'm using a private printer in England, getting the book shipped to me, then doing all the shipping myself. So it's been so much more than a book. Like, it's a small business without the financial reward. But like, people don't write books for financial reward, or at least if they do, it's a bad business plan.
Absolutely, I guess I can kind of tie that into podcasts and everything. Where it'd be cool and everything if I made money doing this and everything. But I mean, it's a hobby and everything. It's something I enjoy doing. Which you doing that book and everything. It's like you weren't going to write, like you said, just for the sake of writing. You were going to write something that you were passionate about. And it's the same with me doing a podcast. I'm not going to go in with a mindset like I'm going to become a millionaire doing a podcast. I'm not going to make thousands of pounds, thousands of dollars. No, I'm going to talk about a team that I'm so passionate about. I'm going to connect with people like you that are as passionate about the sport as I am and everything, and just connecting with people. That's what I love, just connecting with people over in England like yourself, connecting with people in different parts of the United States, seeing people listen all over the world to the podcast and everything. I mean, it feels really good and everything. And I would much rather, know that people are getting joy out of this podcast than getting paid money and everything just because, people like this podcast. Like I love getting feedback from people and just doing this because it's a fun hobby, and if money comes with it, so be it and everything. But my intentions were, no, I'm not going to become rich doing a podcast and everything. And it's refreshing to hear that's your mindset too with doing the book. But were you ever worried that you wouldn't be able to reach your Kickstarter goal?
Yes, massively. And I think the fact that I did so much research on how to crowdfund successfully, and in particular to Kickstarter, I think because I had the awareness of sure signs that a Kickstarter will fail or succeed, I was like hyper aware of these things. So, for example, one of the big facts are a Kickstarter is more likely to hit its target. This sounds like blatantly obvious, but I'll explain. So it says a Kickstarter is more likely to be successful the more money it has early on. And you think, well, yeah, of course, because they've got plenty of time left to get the rest of the money. But like the psychology behind it is that somebody that's looking at your project is more likely to back it if it is already quite near its target. If people see that you're, a couple of thousand away from your target and you've only got 5 days left, even though they've got nothing to lose by putting the money back because money isn't taken unless you hit your target, people think, oh, well, this is never going to succeed, so I'm not going to back it. So I knew things were important, like getting 20% in the first 5 days is one of the figures putting on it. I knew that the average crowdfunding project will have a high beginning and a high ending, but really dip in the middle. And it's getting over that dip in the middle, which normally defines the success of a Kickstarter. So you get like a few slow days, maybe 10 slow days in the middle that you really need to try and push through and keep the publicity up for a crowdfunder. And doing all that through social media was a very intense project. I had 700 followers on Twitter when I started this project last April. I've now got 3,000. And so that's for the project. I'm hand on heart sure that 19% of those people would not be following me on Twitter if it wasn't for the book. They are here for the book. They're not here for me. They're not here because they care what I'm doing at the weekends or how Southampton are doing in the Premier League. They're here for the book. And that's really heartwarming. I've never based success on numbers. I wouldn't base success on money, but it's a very heartwarming thing to see that many people have got behind this project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so crazy just to think, all the people that you reached out to that backed you on this book and everything, and the people have gone above and beyond, and I'm sure we're hit on just, the charity work that you've done and everything and your experiences in Venezuela. But before we talk about those experiences in Venezuela, could you just highlight some things about the book, like how many pages are included, people that you met that were crucial to the book, just things of that nature?
Yeah, of course. So at the beginning of the project, I knew that I wanted to produce a 100,000 word book that was about 300 pages long. That was the standard length of my books on my shelf, my favorite football books. I picked up and I looked at them and I thought, well, how long are these books? Because I don't like it when a book is too short, not because I'm like, oh, I want a big book because I paid this amount of money for it, but because I like to really get into a topic. So I looked at my favorites. I worked out what the average was, and that's what I was basing it off of, as well as the timeline aspects. I knew that if I was going to convince people of pre-ordering a book a long way before it was out, let alone pre-order a book that I hadn't even started writing. Like, I knew that I had to give a definite timeline, and I knew I had to stick to it. So from the very beginning, I set my target and knew that I was going to have to write 3,000 words every week for the next like 10 months to hit target. And then about 5 weeks after the Kickstarter was successful, I broke my arm from my wrist to my shoulder. I was in full cast. My arm was cast at like a right angle. I couldn't type. I couldn't write. My daughter at the time was like 9 months old. Like, I couldn't pick her up or, change her nappy, her diaper. Like, I couldn't do any of that. But the biggest hit was I couldn't write. And for 4 or 5 weeks, and then I had to go to Venezuela with a broken arm as well. For 4 or 5 weeks, like, I fell 25,000 words, like 25% behind schedule. So I knew I had to recalculate how I was going to get everything done. But in the end, I don't know how, I don't know why, but I ended up writing 160,000 words, 140,000 words, 20,000 words in footnotes. So the book came out at 524 pages long. Because of going independently printed, and because the Kickstarter overachieved, I've been able to include a 16-page color plate with over 30 photos. So one of my biggest worries was producing a professional looking book. As soon as I went self-published, I knew the one thing that I really had to succeed in was making sure that at the end, the finished product, no matter how good or bad what I've written was, the finished product had to look as good as a published book on the bookshelf. I've read plenty of self-published books that I've really enjoyed. The quality inside the pages is excellent, but you can tell that it was self-published because of its finish or whatever. And I really wanted to try and replicate a professional finish. So the Kickstarter is something that really helped me achieve that. So yeah, I was delighted with that. In terms of like the people I met in Venezuela, I was able to conduct about 45 to 50 interviews with professional players, and then 100 interviews in total. So another 55 interviews comprising of players aside, managers, coaches, agents, journalists, scouts, to take the total to just over 100 interviews.
That is crazy. I mean, if you guys are listening like right now, like if it's not obvious by now that Jordan stayed busy, that this was a massive project, then I don't know what more Jordan has to do to convince you of that and everything. Because I mean, to go self-published, to, like I said earlier, you were offered a publishing deal and it just wasn't for you and everything. And like, this is truly your baby. This is your project. You had every say on it. You dictated, this is how I want the process to go and everything. This is how I want to rank my book and everything, not somebody else. Hey, look, we know this is your idea and everything, but this is what we think's going to be successful for the book. This was all you and everything. And, it just blows my mind just to see 524 pages where you went in. Like, yeah, I need like 300, and you overachieved that goal. And then you had that setback with your arm and everything. And you were like, man, that had to be just such a blow to your morale that you're like, man, like everything was going great and everything. I was overachieving with the Kickstarter, and then that happens and everything, and you're like, oh God, what am I going to do now? And not only the book, but your daughter. You had a young daughter at home. You obviously still have your daughter, but she's not as young as she was then and everything. But it's like, man, you were in such a big high and everything, and then the whole my arm and everything. And I mean, that could be just deteriorating on somebody, especially where you calculated everything down to percentages and like, this is when I need to hit this goal. If not, it's going to mess everything out. And well, somehow you found a way to persevere.
Yeah, it was like, I won't lie to you. There were a few times where I considered quitting for various reasons, but like that was only ever fleeting, because like where I had the backing of Kickstarters, where I knew that as soon as I'd finished writing this book, there was already 180 people that were expecting a copy. I knew that there were 191 people that had supported the project through like donations or whatever. If I didn't have that, if I was just writing a book to then publish at the end, be it with a publishing house or on my own, I think I would have quit. It was the fact that I knew I had that support. I knew people were following the project and believing in me that sort of kept me going. One of the moments that I felt like quitting was when I broke my arm, because it was just so unfortunately terrible to happen so soon after I'd made these plans. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to write for so long. Another time was actually like the morning of my second day in Venezuela. My first 24 hours in Venezuela were horrific, and I was just like, why am I doing this? Why am I here? Like, all the people that were telling me it was a terrible idea or telling me not to go, like I was hearing their voices. And then a third time was sort of like, I can't remember exactly when, but Venezuela is like a very sensitive topic for not just Venezuelans, but like people that have very strong political beliefs. Like, it's a very divisive topic, and like, I've had not too many, fortunately, but like I've had people like wish me dead for writing this book, and like people that don't even know what I'm writing necessarily. People come into like presumptions. For example, like, I publicized who had reviewed my book like towards the end, when other writers and journalists had read snippets of my book and provided reviews for the back cover. I know somebody said, "Oh, I'm not going to read this book. Like, it's going to be rubbish because so and so has given it a review, and he's like a massive imperialist, like pro-US, pro-capitalist scum. So like, this book is going to be terrible." And I was just like, oh dear, you don't even know what I've written.
Didn't even give it a chance. It's like, oh, I know how this person is, so man, I'm like, I know what you're saying. I'm not even going to get into this topic and try to make it political, because you guys know I never try to make things political and everything. So I know what you're saying, Jordan. I'll leave it at that and everything. But the one thing, you sent me notes and everything that I find super fascinating is you believe that soccer is becoming, or football is becoming, the number one sport in Venezuela, replacing baseball. And it's like, it's so mind blowing, because I'm a big Major League Baseball fan, and you see so many Venezuelans playing in the MLB. But for soccer to become the number one sport, I was like mind blown that soccer is like, I mean, yes, it's South America, and South Americans love soccer and everything, but if you don't pay attention to sport that much, or if you don't pay attention to baseball, you wouldn't know there's a lot of Venezuelans in Major League Baseball. So to see that soccer is now starting to replace baseball is just mind blowing to me.
Yeah, so like there will never be it will never be forgotten that like baseball is always going to be the most historical, most traditional sport in Venezuela. Like, that's written into history. It's part of Venezuelan culture. But that role that it had in society was heavily brought about by American influence and interest in Venezuela. Like, Venezuela has always been an oil-rich company, and back in the 1940s, 50s, oil companies like Shell had a big presence in Venezuela, and a lot of migrant workers were brought over to work in the mines and the refineries. Europeans from like Italy, Portugal, Spain came over, and the entertainment was baseball, because a lot of the businesses were American, and that's where they chose to put their money. But you also had Europeans coming in to work, and obviously their sport was football, and that's sort of where the problem in Venezuelan's football evolution began, because you had the people playing football in Venezuela not being Venezuelan. They were Europeans. They were playing amongst themselves. They were playing in their colonies against others, representing their own. Whereas the American influence, the oil companies, they pumped money into baseball. They built infrastructure. They had the TV rights. They had the sponsorship. So baseball really became the powerhouse. That's where the money was. That's what people saw. That's what people were playing. Whereas football was still something that, yeah, it happens here, but it's what the foreigners do. And that is represented in Venezuelan football history. The most successful teams for decades were teams like Deportivo Italia, the Italian colony, Deportivo Galicia in Spain. And then you had the Portuguese team, which was then Maritimo. That's where a lot of the football success came from. But now, like in the 21st century, you've got football taking a prominent role in culture in Venezuela. And the reason why I think that is is I am not a big baseball, or I'm not a baseball fan, full stop. Like I've never watched more than snippets. But like one thing I do know about baseball is that it's not a globally participated in sport. The World Series. You answer this question. I'll ask you this question. The World Series, like how many countries play in the World Series?
None. Just America.
Whereas like obviously the football offers the World Cup.
Yeah.
That's representation to the entire world. And Venezuela in the past 20 years has craved positive representation on the international stage, be that politicians looking for legitimacy. So obviously Hugo Chavez before, Nicolas Maduro now. But even last March, you had Juan Guaido, the leader of the opposition, the self-declared president, sort of hijacking football for political means. You had Venezuela in the international break in March playing 2 friendlies in Spain. They played Argentina and beat them, which was massive. And then they played Catalonia a few days later. And at that time, Juan Guaido sent his Spanish ambassador to meet the national team. And Rafael Dudamel, the manager at the time of the national team, had photos with his ambassador. But Dudamel said, this is Dudamel's account. He said, I don't want this to become political. Like, these photos are for private use. Please don't publicize them on social media. Venezuela's game kicks off. 10 minutes later, they're all over social media. And it's that age-old way of politics taking hold of a successful sport for political gains. You see it when a country hosts the Olympics. So like in Brazil, when they just wiped favelas out of existence to build mega parks to keep it off the TV. You see it in football with the World Cups, like in Johannesburg and the other South African host cities in 2010. And it's no different. But then you also got the public who crave football for the representation it offers on an international stage. In the past 20 years, that is what Venezuelan people have needed, because the narrative on Venezuela has become so unidimensional. It's become so focused on oil and politics. And, when a country is defined by just 1 or 2 characteristics, you're missing so much more. And football has become a way of Venezuelan people having their country seen for something otherwise. And it's coincided with the growth in performance and the growth and reputation of the Venezuelan national team and Venezuelan players.
Yeah, so that's a little question I gave you. Now we get that big gigantic answer, which I definitely appreciate that. But one thing I should have asked you earlier and everything, so my apologies for that, is how long were you in Venezuela for?
15 days. So I arrived on October. Well, I had to fly via Spain. I had to fly via Madrid. So I had a 12-hour stopover in Madrid from midnight till 12 midday, which wasn't comfortable with a broken arm and 6 suitcases. But I was lucky to have a Venezuelan called Santiago meet me at the airport. He lives in Madrid now. He was a part of the student protests in 2017. He's started following the project through a friend who works for Bellingcat, the investigative journalism outlet. He met me at Madrid airport and we spent a few hours just chatting. It ended up developing into a chapter for the book. And then I got my head down for a few hours, literally sleeping on top of my suitcases. And then in the morning, a guy called Ignacio Benedetti, who's the former chief press officer for the national team and a quality journalist in his own right. He met me in the morning, kept me company for a few hours and saw me onto my flight. And then, I arrived in Venezuela on October the 20th, stayed for 15 days, started in Caracas and sort of snaked west, visited 5 cities, saw 5 live games, met and interviewed plenty of professionals. And it was a fantastic, very tiring and intense couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. But out of all the places that you visited, I mean, that's a good amount of time to spend anywhere. Usually, people, if they go on vacation, it'd be for a couple of days or a week or something like that. But 15 days, it's half a month, basically, or it is half a month. So do you have any favorite places of those that you visited down in Venezuela?
Yeah, so I think it may be because I spent the most amount of time there, or it may be because I live in London in England, like the capital. It may be because it was also capital, but I grew very fond of Caracas. I think another thing that plays into that is when I was in Caracas, I spent all my time with Kevin, my translator. I spent all my time in Venezuela full stop with Kevin in the end, which wasn't the initial plan, but the best thing that could have happened. But like when I was in Caracas, I was with Kevin in his own city. The small amount of downtime we did get, we spent with his friends. He showed me the normal side of Venezuela, like, away from the football world, which we were very privileged to be in. He showed me the normality in Venezuela. And he also showed me like the good side of Venezuela that you don't see in the news. Like, obviously, poverty is a huge, inescapable problem in Venezuela, regardless of your political persuasion. It is there and you cannot ignore it. But like, he also showed me that, there's plenty of people that aren't in poverty, and those that aren't still have, a normal life that people in the West are used to. Like, we went to nightclubs, we went to a shopping center. The shopping center, the lights in the multi-story car park didn't work, and it was in pitch black. And he told me not to speak English when I was there. And when we got into the shopping center, the escalators didn't work. They'd been turned off to save electricity. But like, had they not been, you could have been anywhere in the world. Like, this was a shopping center that 10 years ago was hosting like Gwen Stefani and Enrique Iglesias and, top music artists from around the world. Like, people aren't familiar with seeing this side of Venezuela. Like, I'm not saying what you see in the news is wrong, because it isn't. But like, there is more to it. And with Kevin in Caracas, I was able to see that. I really enjoyed my time in Merida and Táchira. They're two of the Andean cities that I went to, where football really is the heartbeat of the city. And then the other two places I visited were Barinas, which is the home of Zamora FC, which is the most successful side in Venezuelan football of the past decade. And the other place I went to was Maracay, which is home of Aragua FC, which is most famous to the rest of the world, although people won't know it, is where Salomon Rondon started. When he took his step into Europe, it's Aragua FC that he came from.
Dropping knowledge. I love it. But so while you were over in Venezuela, I got to imagine you traveled with some teams. And if so, how were the experiences?
It was something that I had to rely on once I knew it was there. So to begin with, one of the biggest difficulties of getting everything I wanted to do was, how was I going to travel around the country? Like, I was only there for 15 days. Like, it's not a small amount of time, but also it's not considerable when you're considering what I was trying to achieve. I would have loved to spend a lot more time there. I would love to go back again. But going to Venezuela was essential. A lot of the interviews I did, I also arranged follow-up interviews with the same people or other people when I got back to England. But it was really essential to be there. And what I didn't want to do when I was there was waste time at all. But travel and wasting time were two things I had to delicately balance, because it was dangerous to travel at night in the dark. But also, if I was traveling during the day, these were long journeys that I was having to make. And if I was sat in a car for 6 hours in daylight, when I'm there for 15 days, that's a lot of time wasted not interviewing, not meeting people, not seeing games. So I had to really, really strike a balance there. And one of the things that I noticed when I planned my itinerary is that Aragua FC, the team from Maracay, were playing Zamora FC, the team from Barinas, the day after I planned on making the journey myself. And at that point, I was already in contact with the manager of Aragua FC, the head coach, Kike Garcia. And I basically was a bit cheeky, and I said, look, this is my plan. This is where you're going to be. Is there any chance that I could travel with you to the away game? Like, is there space on the team bus for me to come? And I was expecting either him to tell me to do one or say like, oh, yeah, I'll look into it and never get back to me. Straight away, he was like, yeah, I don't see why not. Like, I'll confirm it. But yeah, it's fine. And if you can't, we'll sort something else out. It was like incredible. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I traveled with the first team. It was like a 5-6 hour journey. Like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't spend those 5 or 6 hours interviewing people, but like, it wasn't time wasted for the experience and what was happening. And then that happened again with Deportivo Táchira. Táchira are based in San Cristobal, which is a town about 50 miles away from the Colombian border. And it was very important that Kevin and I went there because along with Caracas FC, it's like one of the biggest teams in the country. And the rivalry between those two teams is beyond intense. It's crazy. Like it proliferates past football just into everyday life. So getting to Táchira sort of became this side project obsession that we had to get there. But it was 12 hours away from Caracas. And we were like, how are we going to get back? Like a taxi would have just been, if it was even possible to find a taxi that would take us, you then got the fuel problem. You'd have to find a taxi that had like a full tank. And then would a full tank be enough to get us 500 kilometers, whatever it was, across the country, a 12-hour drive? Like, who knows? And they were dangerous roads. We would have had to do it safely. We would have had to leave Táchira at like 8 a.m. and arrive in Caracas at 8 p.m. And that's just like a day wasted immediately. There was an airport close by, but the flights in Venezuela were like, yeah, there might be a flight. And then you can turn up and have your ticket, and then the flight just doesn't happen for whatever reason. So it became really risky. But fortunately, Jorge Silva, who is the president of Deportivo Táchira, arranged for us to travel with his team back to the capital, because although they weren't playing Caracas have 4 teams in the top flight, and their reserve team were playing a cup game in Caracas on the Saturday, and then Deportivo Táchira were playing Aragua FC, the team that I'd travelled with in the first instance, on the Sunday. So they all travelled to Caracas on the Friday, and we went with them on the team bus on an overnight journey. So it was perfect. We got back safely. We got back for free, which was another bonus. But also, it was an overnight drive where we knew we'd be safe because we were travelling with a professional team under police escort.
Yeah, it's awesome. That is, I mean, that's a great experience right there. And yeah, I'm sure, you've definitely, like you said earlier, you've seen, the ugliness and everything, the stuff you see on TV and everything. But I think, the one thing that I enjoyed the most about paying attention to your experience over in Venezuela is you knew you were going to Venezuela and you were like, look, does anybody want to send me football equipment, soccer equipment, whatever you guys want to call it? And people just went above and beyond. They sent you 628 items, you told me, which included 6 suitcases. That's why you had to take 6 suitcases for the people that are like, wait, he's traveling by himself. Why is he taking 6 suitcases? Well, there's your answer. That's why I took 6 suitcases. And the items included shirts, shorts, socks, boots, balls, whatever you could take with you in 6 suitcases. And you just gave people in Venezuela these items and everything. And I'm sure that made their days, made the whole year, maybe some of them even their lives and everything, where they're living in poverty and don't have money to go and get this stuff and everything. And here comes a guy from the UK and everything just handing this stuff out and everything. And that's one of the things that I love, is just people went above and beyond and were like, here, I have no use for this anymore. Just go ahead, take it and everything. And to these kids that you were giving this stuff to, it was, I'm sure, like Christmas time to them. They don't care if it's used. It's like they're going to cherish what you gave them for a lifetime and everything. Now, unfortunately, I know I'm reading what you posted on Twitter back when you were flying and everything. The bag got confiscated at the airport in Venezuela and everything. So I'm sure that had to be such a discouraging situation for you to be in and everything. So what was that like to you have 6 suitcases? You were planning on giving all this away, which eventually you did get the stuff back and everything. But I'm sure you're like, oh no, like there's no way I'm getting this stuff back. How was that situation?
It was like the worst start to. It was the worst possible start. It was atrocious. When I arrived at the airport, everything was running smooth. I was hyper aware of what was going on because I'd received like warning messages, well-meaning warning messages, like be careful at the airport, don't accept help off of anyone, don't get into a taxi, make sure that you're being met by somebody that you trust. People had told me to, if I was packing trainers, to put one trainer in one bag and another trainer in the other bag. So if anyone went through your bag to check it for legitimate reasons, your shoes didn't go missing for illegitimate reasons, shall we say. So I was already like hyper alert. But, I arrived at the airport. I've been to Cuba and the Dominican Republic, 2 other Caribbean countries. And, Venezuela's airport was certainly better than the airport of Dominican Republic, and probably better than the one at Cuba as well. Like it was a modern airport. It was well staffed. It was clean. And the one thing that stuck out massively is when people were saying that, and they were right, but when people were saying that the airport was like run by armed forces kind of thing, like one of the branches of the armed forces, like, that was true. Like the guy that checked my passport at first was a soldier, but like he was about 18 years old and more interested in playing on his phone. I think the only real reason that he bothered looking up from my phone is because he looked at my passport and was like, what is this? Like he just didn't recognize it. And that like sparked his interest. But then once I got through, people saw me with my broken arm. They saw the donations I took in. There's a big store in England called IKEA. I don't know if you have them in the US.
Yep, we do.
You do? Yeah, okay. So they sell like massive holdalls at a very low price, like made out of canvas material. I wasn't going to take 6 empty suitcases back to England with me. So I just bought these strong, durable, but cheap holdalls. And they're bright blue. They're absolutely hideous. Bright blue, yellow zips. And there was one on the conveyor belt that I'd wrapped with industrial gaffer tape to stop people getting into it. And then people saw another one appear and another one appear. And they were looking at me in like a jumper and jeans and a broken arm thinking, what is this guy doing? So like in terms of normal people were helping me with my bags. They were helping me get them onto the trolley. This like really old guy helped me take it through. And then the problem started when I got to customs. I was half expecting it because I had 6 bags and they were bright blue. And the other half of me was expecting it because people had warned me. What was really disheartening is that I had prepared for the situation. I had put together a spreadsheet detailing every single item that was in the bags and who it had come from and a description of what it was. And I also had a supporting letter saying where it was going to and the contact numbers of a few important people like presidents of professional football clubs. I even name dropped Adelis Chavez, who's the brother of the former president Hugo Chavez. Like, I thought, well, if people see Chavez's name, they're going to leave me alone. Surely his number's there. They'll ring him. But, that is not what happened. So I got taken into customs and I was left in this very bland room for about 5 hours. They took my passport off me. They took my 6 suitcases off me. For the first hour, I was on my own. And I can speak Spanish, but like I'm far from fluent. I can only really speak in the present tense. Like I understand more than I can speak, but that's sort of no good when you can't respond to what you've understood. And then after an hour, they sort of relented and allowed me to have my translator, Kevin, with me. But I was there for 5 hours and it was just a very long delay tactic from them. And it finished with them giving me a bill for $5,000 saying, yeah, you can have your stuff back, but we've taxed it at this rate and you're going to need $5,000 to get it back. And like, the stuff in there was not worth $5,000. There was a really generous mix of brand new stuff or very high quality stuff, along with like a pair of socks, which were absolutely fine, like no holes in them or anything, but they weren't even matching. And they were taxing every item at $34. Hard, like 95% of the stuff in there was not even worth $35, like not let alone a tax rate. So by the time I got out the airport, it was like 10:30 in the evening. And yeah, I left without any of the donations whatsoever.
Yeah, that's such discouraging for you to have a wasted day pretty much in the airport and for them just to giving you the runaround and everything, trying to break you and everything. But you stayed strong and eventually you did get the suitcases back and you were able to go ahead and give away the items to the kids and everything. And another thing that you did back in December, I believe it was, you did a similar campaign in December of 2019 where you raised $1,000 to kid 100 kids for that Christmas and everything. So I'm sure, when you handed this stuff out, when you got those kids, 100 kids, a brand new kid and everything, I'm sure that the look on their face, I'm sure that's something you'll never forget.
Yeah, it was like a very like emotional experience. Like some of it just felt surreal. Some of it was quite intimidating, to be honest. Like on my last Saturday there, because we were because Kevin and I were out without the donations for the first like 4 days because they were being held by customs, we lost a lot of time to donate them. So we ended up having to donate a lot in a small amount of time. And we took a few big bags of kit to the it was the Sunday actually. So my penultimate full day, we took a load of kit to the Araga-Táchira game with the view to give it out to kids that were going to the game before the game, halftime, afterwards. And we got a good spot in the car park. People knew that we were there. People like got wind of what we had in the back of the car to give out, which was absolutely fine. But what screwed everything up is that in the second half, like the heavens opened and it was just like torrential rain. And we were like, this is not going to work. And we basically ended up, the three of us, me, Kevin, and Kevin's friend Diego, in the back of Kevin's car in the pouring rain, handing out shirts and shorts and socks through a car window. But we had all the car doors locked because we were literally surrounded by like 100 kids. And some of these kids were like not kids. They were like potentially as old as like 17, 18. Absolutely surrounded, like people grabbing at the football shirts. But fortunately, like a few of the mums, like these were proper like stereotypical Latin American mums. Like you probably got a lot more Latin American culture and understand what I mean a lot more than a lot of people in England. But like these were matriarchal women. They were like not taking the kids like attitude or anything. And suddenly these kids were like in orderly queues. And they're like, these women are like 5'2", like there's not like 140 centimeters. There's nothing to them, but like you listen when they talk. And like these kids got in line, and although it was like absolutely hammering it down with rain, it all became very orderly. And then there were other moments where it was the mums more than anything that got to me emotionally. Like when I was handing out these donations that people in England had so generously given me, and like it was oh man, like it's emotional. It was the mums that got me. Like when I was giving out like boots or shirts to like the kids, you know, to a kid, it's just like, oh, it's amazing, I've got a football shirt. But like the emotion on the mum's face is more like raw tears and like appreciation that I've just being able to give the donations from people to England has taken like a massive weight off of that parent's mind, or something that maybe wasn't even a weight on their mind because it was just out of the realms of possibility. And like a few times it was like very, very overwhelming.
Yeah, I can imagine and everything. But as we get towards wrapping up this episode and everything, can you go ahead and tell people like any of the players that you've interviewed that either have played in MLS or currently play in MLS?
Yeah, so the two ones that I spoke to the most was Christian Cáceres Jr., who plays for New York Red Bulls. he had a great season last year. He won the Red Bulls Defensive Player of the Year award. It was his first full season in the senior team. Maybe people didn't realize or expect it to be like for like, but he basically filled that gap that Tyler Adams had left. And he, over the course of the season, like he just went from strength to strength. And in terms of his dedication to his career and his determination to succeed, like his is top notch. Like I spoke to him for hours. I spoke to his dad. I spoke to his teammates, some of his teammates, Miguel Silva and Edgardo Rito, two Venezuelans that were bought into New York Red Bulls and New York Red Bulls 2. Is that how you call it?
It
New
is,
York Red Bulls 2?
Yep.
Yeah, they were bought in. And I spoke to them as well, obviously being Venezuelan. One of them knew Cáceres from playing in Venezuela as well. And I was just like, there must be a crack in this guy. Like all I'm getting from him is like straight down the line, entirely dedicated. And everyone I spoke to was like, yeah, like that's the case. Like he doesn't do things outside of football. Like he spends his free time at home, like reading the books that his coaches are recommending, or like making healthy food. Although he admits that he gets most of his food at the clubhouse because, like, you know, he came to the US at like 18 years old. He'd only ever lived at home with his mum. So yeah, he was a great guy to talk to. And there's a chapter of which like half is dedicated to him and the future of young Venezuelans in the MLS that are probably going to form, at least a quarter of the national side going forward. And then also Philadelphia Union player, Aurelian Collin. Spoke to him. And speaking to him was like really enlightening. He's much more than just a footballer. Like, he's a very intellectual guy. He's very clever. He's very intelligent. His interests go far and beyond football. And his connection to Venezuela, like he's not Venezuelan. Like, I presume most Philadelphia, if not every Philadelphia Union fan, will know that he's French. But he's married to a Venezuelan woman, and he has this very strong affiliation to the country, and has very noble and very motivated reasons for his love of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of Colin and everything, he I'm sure you probably know, came through played for New York Red Bulls and everything, and spent time at Sporting KC. And the one thing, we forgive him for playing for New York Pink Cows, as we call them here. Cannot stand the New York Red Bulls. But the one thing, he's been such a good mentor for the younger kids and everything at the club. And yeah, he knows that he's not a starter anymore, but just his experience and everything. That's why we're so happy when the Union brought him back. Like, there were some fans like, oh, how can you bring him back? He's way past it. It's like, okay, yeah, he might be past it, but when you play your cup games and everything, he wouldn't be a bad option playing in a cup game. But more importantly, he's there to mentor these younger players, and he's seen it all and everything. He's fine with that, and that's what I love about Aurelian Collin. He's not demanding, I need to start week in, week out, because he knows he's just not there anymore. And looking at players like Sergio Santos, who we got from Brazil, who's 24, I believe he is, and everything, El Brujo, the Venezuelan, as we all know, that we got, and everything, those are two guys that he mentors and everything, and that experience is priceless and everything. And I don't care what team you are, you always have to have a player like that on your team and everything. And then it's always nice, seeing him on the sidelines and everything, just joking around with the teammates or salsa dancing and everything after El Senior or somebody scores a goal. It's like, yeah, this guy, he has a seriousness about him, but you can also tell that he has a jokester attitude as well. So, just because he played for the Pink Cows doesn't mean that I hate him. And I'm sure, some of the listeners might and everything, but I think Colin is crucial for this team, especially being a young team that Philadelphia Union are.
Yeah, and he's another thing that he brings with age and experience is that he's a very well-traveled player. Like, he's played in Scotland, he's played in England. Well, the team he played for are based in Wales, Wrexham, but like within the English football pyramid, Greece, Portugal, and then he's been in America for like coming up to 10 years now.
It's been a while.
So he's a very experienced player. He's played against Roma. I can't remember what team he was at the time, but he's come up against like Francesco Totti. Like, he's an experienced guy. But yeah, like I said, there's so much more to him than just football. And talking to him gave me a lot of insight into avenues to explore further. He spoke very passionately about his desire to play for the Venezuelan national team. Obviously, like, now that won't happen, but he was talking about 7, 8 years ago, when his desire to play in Venezuela was really there, like a year or two into playing for, Sporting Kansas. And he was in contention, but the way he told the story to me is that, there were people in the federation that would rather he didn't. Like, some were for legitimate reasons, like they wanted Venezuelans playing for Venezuela, but also, he was and remains, maybe outspoken is too strong, but like, people know where he stands on the Venezuelan issue. And from my experience and from the people I've spoken to and the things I've seen, like, the Venezuelan Football Federation is not the independent football federation that FIFA expects federations to be. Like, there is definitely political influence there. The easiest example of that is that the vice president of the Venezuelan Football Federation is a serving minister in the government. Like, that's in complete contravention of FIFA rules, but, FIFA aren't doing anything about it. So yeah, like, I have a lot of respect for Aurelian.
Yeah, absolutely. And FIFA's going to FIFA, so we all know how corrupt FIFA are. But it's been a pleasure, having you back on the podcast and everything. And for people, that have enjoyed listening to you talk for about the last hour and everything, you can pre-order the book. And why don't you go ahead and tell people where they can pre-order it and find you on social media?
Yeah, so Twitter is where I'm at. and my Twitter handle is the False Libero, Libero. The link to pre-order the book will be in my bio. Depending on when you hear this podcast, it may be that you're pre-ordering through my Big Cartel website. It may be through Amazon, but yeah, if anything isn't clear to you, just send me a DM. My DMs are open. And yeah, the book is on general release from the 31st of August. But any pre-orders that are in by the middle of August will be shipped out in time for hopefully a very early September delivery.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it, Jordan. I love it. And for all you guys listening, if you're not following the podcast for whatever reason on social media, you can find it at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Free Kick Pod. Check out the website, thefreekickpodcast.com. And don't forget, we're doing a 2020 Philadelphia Union jersey giveaway. It's really, really simple and everything. And I've told you guys at the last couple of episodes and everything how to get involved. And a lot of you guys have taken the opportunity to enter this competition, but I will always remind you guys how to enter the competition, what the rules are and whatnot until August 9th. So ways of entry are leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, search The Free Kick, Todd Lewis, show a screenshot of your review. That gets you 2 entries. Tag a friend on the post, that's 1 entry, and then retweet this post, that's 1 more entry. Rules, only a max of 4 entries per person. The winner has 24 hours to claim his or her prize after the drawing. If the 24 hours pass without the winner claiming the prize, then we'll redraw a new winner. To be eligible for the jersey, you have to be following the Twitter account at FreeKickPod. And like I said, the competition runs from July 9th through August 9th. And good luck. And like I said, Jordan, it's been amazing to talk to you again. Like we said earlier, it's almost been a year and everything. So I'm glad to see your arms all healed up and everything. This book, at the time, it's like, yeah, I'm all in and everything. And let's hope that other people get on board and just back this project. And they've definitely backed the project, and now you're shipping the books all over. And now for the people that didn't help with the Kickstarter, now's your chance to pre-order this book and everything. And I can't wait to get my hands on my physical copy whenever it it leaves the Atlantic Ocean and arrives on land.
Hopefully it's with you soon. Thank you very much for having me back.
Yeah, no problem. And with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.